It began on an ordinary afternoon in an ordinary kitchen with an ordinary argument between a man and his refrigerator. The ice dispenser had jammed again, and in a moment of frustration, he struck the door with the side of his fist. There was a flash of light, a low hum that rose and fell like a held breath, and then silence. When the light faded, the kitchen was gone. The tiled floor beneath his feet had become packed earth. The hum of the refrigerator was the only familiar sound left in a world that no longer resembled the one he had known moments before. Around him stood a crowd of people dressed in rough, hand-stitched clothing, gathered near torches that flickered against a darkening sky. Their faces were a mixture of confusion and fear, fixed not on him, but on the tall white box standing beside him, humming steadily as if nothing at all were wrong. He did not understand what had happened. He would spend many days trying to understand it, and even then, he would never fully succeed. But in that first moment, understanding was not what mattered. Survival was. The villagers had never seen anything like the object beside him. Its smooth, cold surface reflected the torchlight in a way that felt unnatural to them. Its low hum sounded, to their ears, like breathing. The breathing of something alive. Words spread through the crowd in whispers, and the whispers spread fear faster than any explanation could follow. Before he could gather his thoughts, hands seized him by the arms. He did not resist. There was little use in resisting a crowd that outnumbered him by the dozens, and some quiet instinct told him that calm was his only real weapon. He was marched through narrow, dirt paths toward the center of the village, the refrigerator dragged behind him by several reluctant men, its door swinging, with each uneven pull, ice rattling faintly inside like something trying to escape. The villagers kept their distance from the box even as they hauled it, as though touching it too long might invite some unknown curse upon them. He was brought before the ruler of the village, a king, though his kingdom was small enough that the title seemed almost too large for it. The king sat upon a modest wooden throne, watching the stranger and the strange object with equal suspicion. The man tried, as best he could, to explain that he meant no harm, that the box was not a living thing, that it was simply built to keep things cold. His words meant little to a court that had never heard the word electricity, let alone understood it. What they understood was fear, and fear was a difficult thing to argue with. It was an old woman near the back of the hall, a quiet, unassuming figure who seemed to carry more authority in her silence than the guards carried in their spears, who finally spoke. She suggested, simply, that the box be opened. If it held something dangerous, better to know now. If it held nothing at all, better to know that too. The man agreed. He walked to the refrigerator under the watchful eyes of the entire court and pulled the door open. Cold air spilled out in a visible mist, curling low across the floor. Several villagers stepped back. Others gasped. To people who had never seen refrigeration, never seen breath-like fog rise from an object that was not alive, the sight was unsettling in a way that words could not easily calm. He reached inside, retrieved a single piece of ice, and held it up for the court to see. It took time to convince them it would not burn, would not curse, would not harm. It took a woman stepping forward, the same one who had suggested opening the box, to press her palm against a chilled bottle of water before others believed it was simply cold and nothing more. Slowly, cautiously, understanding began to replace fear, not all at once and not completely, but enough. In the days that followed, the man remained in the village, uncertain of how to return to the life he had left behind, uncertain if return was even possible. He needed a place to sleep, food to eat, and some way to survive in a world that ran on trade rather than currency as he understood it. It was then that he began to see an opportunity in the very thing that had terrified the village only days before. He offered the king a bottle of water taken straight from the refrigerator, chilled far beyond anything the villagers could produce in the heat of summer. He explained, patiently, that where he came from, cold water and ice were common things, small comforts that people rarely thought twice about. Here, in a village where wells ran warm under the summer sun and where ice existed only as something that fell briefly from the sky in winter, the same comfort felt like something closer to a blessing. The king drank. His expression shifted from doubt to surprise and then to something quieter, a kind of appreciation that came from tasting something his kingdom had never been able to offer its people. It was in that moment that the man realized what he had, without meaning to, brought into this world. Not a miracle and not a curse, but a resource. one that no one else in this land possessed. He began, cautiously at first, to offer his ice and cold water to those willing to trade for it. A farmer brought grain in exchange for water cold enough to ease the heat of the fields. A hunter offered meat in exchange for a place to store his kill without fear of it spoiling in the summer air. Word of the arrangement spread through the village far faster than word of the strange box ever had. Where fear had once drawn crowds, curiosity now drew customers. The villagers who had once refused to touch the refrigerator now lined up outside it, offering what little they had in exchange for something they had never known they wanted until they tasted it. Meat that once spoiled within 2 days could now last a week or longer, stored safely inside the humming box. Farmers no longer feared losing their harvest to the heat. Families no longer walked long distances to fetch water from distant wells, only to find it lukewarm and full of dirt by the time they returned. For the first time in the village's history, cold was no longer something they waited for through the changing of seasons. It was something they could simply ask for. As his reputation grew, so did the attention surrounding him. The captain of the king's guard, who had once ordered him seized without hesitation, began to watch him differently. Not with less suspicion, but with a more careful kind of respect, the kind reserved for those whose intentions had not yet been proven false. She questioned him often, testing the consistency of his answers, searching for the trick she still believed must be hidden somewhere beneath the surface of his kindness. She found none. What she found instead was a man who asked for very little in return for what he gave: a place to sleep, enough food to survive, and time. The king, for his part, saw in the man's presence something beyond mere convenience. A ruler of a small, often overlooked village suddenly held something no neighboring kingdom could offer its people. Envoys from nearby lands, hearing rumors of a village that commanded the cold, arrived to see the truth for themselves. Some came with skepticism, expecting exaggeration or trickery. They left having tasted water colder than any well could produce in the height of summer, having seen meat preserved far longer than nature should have allowed. Their skepticism did not survive the tasting. What began as a single village's fear soon became its quiet pride. The king, once uncertain of how to explain the stranger's presence to his people, now spoke of him, carefully and without exaggeration, as someone the village had been fortunate enough to welcome. There was no talk of demons any longer. There was only talk of what this new comfort might mean for a people who had spent generations enduring the heat of summer and the spoilage of stored food as simple, unavoidable facts of life. Yet, even as trust grew, the man remained aware of how fragile his place in this world truly was. He understood that he was not, and would likely never be, one of them. He came from a place they could not imagine, carrying knowledge they had no framework to fully understand. He tried, when he could, to explain what he knew: that the refrigerator did not create cold from nothing, but simply moved heat from one place to another, the same principle in a much smaller and much faster form as a deep cellar dug into cool earth, or snow packed tightly into a winter pit to preserve food through the months of scarcity. It was not magic, it was simply something they had not yet discovered on their own. The old woman who had first told him to open the box understood this better than most. She did not marvel at the refrigerator the way the others did. She studied it. She asked questions not about what it could do, but about how it worked, turning his explanations over in her mind the way one might turn over a stone, searching for what lay beneath its surface. In her, he found the closest thing to genuine understanding this world could offer him. Not worship and not fear, but curiosity. As weeks passed, the village around him began to change in small, steady ways. Storage methods adapted around the idea that food could last longer than anyone had previously believed possible. Farmers began adjusting their planting and harvesting decisions, no longer as constrained by the fear of immediate spoilage. Trade routes shifted slightly as travelers began detouring through the village for the chance to taste cold water in the middle of summer, or to purchase ice to carry, however briefly, to neighboring settlements. The village that had once been the smallest and least significant in the region slowly became a place of quiet, unexpected importance. The king, watching his village grow in reputation, came to understand something the man himself had known from the very beginning: that what he had brought was not a wonder to be feared, nor a miracle to be worshipped, but a tool, one that, like any tool, carried the potential to help or to harm depending on how it was used. He made it a point in the months that followed to ensure the resource was shared fairly, that it did not become something hoarded only by the wealthy or the powerful, but something that eased the daily lives of ordinary people as well. The man, for his part, never stopped thinking about home. There were nights he stood beside the refrigerator, listening to its familiar hum beneath an unfamiliar sky, and wondered if the same flash of light that had brought him here might one day take him back. No answer ever came. The stars above him remained foreign, the constellations unrecognizable, no matter how long he searched them for something familiar. Still, in the absence of a way home, he found something he had not expected to find. A place, however strange, where he was needed. Where the thing that had once made him a stranger, an object as simple in his old world as a kitchen appliance, had become, in this one, a quiet foundation for change. Not through grand gestures or declarations, but through small, steady acts. A bottle of cold water offered to a tired farmer. A piece of meat preserved through a long, hot summer. A single block of ice, once feared, now simply understood. By the time autumn arrived and the first true chill of the season settled over the village, the fear that had greeted him on that first night had faded almost entirely from memory. In its place remained something quieter, and in many ways more lasting. Not fear of the unknown, but the slow, steady trust that comes from watching something unfamiliar prove itself, again and again, through simple acts of usefulness and honesty. The king, seated once more upon his modest throne, would later reflect that the village had not been changed by magic, nor by conquest, nor by any of the forces history usually credited with shaping a people's fate. It had been changed by cold water, offered honestly to people who had simply never had the chance to taste it before. And the man, still uncertain if he would ever see his own world again, remained where he had landed, not as a demon, not as a miracle, but simply as someone who, through circumstances no one could explain, had found a way to belong.